What's more important for building muscle, density or intensity? In this video, we'll explore the differences between these two types of unorthodox training methods and see if we can come to a conclusion. Yo, Elliot! In my last video, I shared with you two of my favorite minimalist training methods. What makes these methods unique is that there's an emphasis on principles rather than tactics. Unlike most training programs that emphasize reps and sets, these two methods focus rather on the quality of the work that you're doing. One is measured by density, or the amount of objective volume that is done within a set period of time. The other is focused on intensity, which is a bit more subjective and based on how much perceived effort you're exerting, though there is some exercise equipment designed to measure your output, just like this one that I used in a training vlog last fall. Now, personally, I have a lot more experience with density training, as it's one of my favorite ways of training for strongman. For example, setting a timer to see how many stone loads I can do in 20 minutes with the goal of beating it at my next workout. It definitely helps me get stronger and better conditioned for competitions, but I'm not sure how effective it is for hypertrophy. Most recently, I've been following a strict high-intensity training program, doing only one set per exercise per body part each workout. Now, mind you, these are brutal sets, employing such tactics as drop sets, rest pause, and isometrics. Now, I'm gonna continue using this method for the next several months while on a calorie deficit with the aim of achieving a more aesthetic look. So I'll be sure to keep you posted with my progress. So let's contrast these two methods a little deeper, that maybe you can choose to employ one or the other to shake up your training a little bit and achieve some new gains. And at the end, I'll let you know my final opinion on both. So on this side, we have escalating density training, EDT training, in the orange. And on this side, we have high intensity training, HIIT training, in the yellow. I think the very first thing that we ought to look at are who are the teachers, coaches, or gurus that brought us these methods. That way we can better get a feel for who they were made for. Now, we got Charles Staley on this side. Charles Staley is a strength coach who designed a lot of great programs and worked with a lot of professional athletes. Staley is still alive himself today. I think he's in his 60s or 70s, and if you check him out on YouTube or Instagram, you'll see this old dude still deadlifting lots of weight. So the methods that he uses have obviously worked for athletes, and if he's still using them himself today, that's proof positive that's a good method to use. Now on this side, we have Arthur Jones, who's known as a bodybuilding coach. He trained a lot of bodybuilders in the 1970s, guys like Casey Viator, who was an inspiration for guys like Mike Mentzer, who in my opinion has one of the best looking bodies in bodybuilding ever. He also inspired and worked with guys like Dorian Yates, who won the Mr. Olympia several times. So right off the bat, you start to get an idea of who these two methods are most suited for. Over here, you got strength coaches, athletes, and you have people who are looking to increase performance. And on this side, you got guys who are bodybuilders, building bulk, and looking to look great on stage. The next thing we'll look at are exercises. So Charles Staley believed that the best way to set up an EDT program was with reciprocal innervation, basically exercises that complement each other. So for example, if you're gonna train the legs, he would say doing a front squat followed by hamstring curls. Why? Because the front squat's gonna focus on the quads and the hamstrings are gonna focus on the hamstrings. And so when you do that, you essentially let the muscle on the opposite side of the body get rested while you train the muscle on the front side of the body, vice versa. And by doing so, there's some sort of scientific reason called reciprocal innervation that allows you to continue to train harder in that back to front sort of method, right? Bicep, tricep, right? Not doesn't take a rocket science to figure it out. But as far as exercises are concerned, they're all compound exercises. He recommends mostly compound exercises and using only 2 exercises per workout, going back and forth. On this side, you have what a lot of the HIIT guys call the Big Six. I'm not sure if Mike Mentzer came up with that term. There's guys like John Little, I believe, who uses that term in some of his books. But the Big Six are basically exercises that hit they're compound exercises that hit the whole body. So the big six includes what? Squats, deadlifts, a vertical push, a vertical pull, a horizontal push, and a horizontal pull. 6, right? So you can just imagine squats, working the front part of the legs, the thighs, deadlifts, working the back. Bench press, working the chest, seated rows, working the back in the horizontal plane. You got overhead press, and then you got pull down. So for example, that's how you would use a HIIT training program to hit the whole body. Big 6, push, pull, legs. Over here, you can essentially use other exercises, but the whole idea is that you want to get that reciprocal innervation thing going on when you're choosing your exercise. With regard to reps and sets, you're going to see the biggest difference between these two methods. Reps and sets on the EDT side are going to be high. Why? Because if you're setting a timer for 15, 20 minutes and you're going back and forth doing sets of 5, as is suggested by Charles Staley, then you're going to end up with like 40, if you're doing 40 reps, then you're getting like 7 sets. 7 sets of 5 is 40, so there's a whole lot more volume. So really what we're looking here is reps and sets, because that's what your volume is, right? It adds up to the volume. So there's gonna definitely be a higher volume on this side. On this side, we're talking, you're choosing a weight that you can do maybe 6 to 10 repetitions, but you're only doing it once. You're only doing 1 set. So if it's 6 here, as opposed to 40 here, of course, the volume is going to be a lot less. The sets are less because you're only doing 1. And then, if you're employing like drop sets or rest pause, even still, there's a fat chance that you're going to get up to 40 repetitions on this side. Say you do a set of 6 and then you drop twice, and maybe you even do 6 again for the 2 drops. That's still only 18. That's still only 18 reps with 2 drop sets. So biggest difference between these two is the amount of mechanical work that you're doing. You're doing a hell of a lot more work over here that may have its benefits, and I'll talk about it in a moment. You're doing a lot less work over here. Now, the flip side of this is that as far as intensity is concerned, you're getting sort of a moderate intensity. Charles Staley suggests choosing a weight that you can do about 10 reps for, but then only doing 5. Because of the accumulation of fatigue over the course of the multiple sets that you're doing, you're going to end up backing off that a little bit, or you're going to end up fatiguing and thus you're going to get more intensity towards the end. So in the beginning, you're kind of like, I don't want to say you're coasting, but you're just doing the reps, pacing yourself. Doing the reps front to back, pacing yourself. And then as you start to get fatigued, as the muscle begins to fatigue and as the metabolic system begins to fatigue, you start to back off the amount of reps that you can do because you just can't do as many, right? If you're going as intense as you should. But it requires a moderate intensity. You're not going that high. On this here, HIIT training, it is high intensity, bro. If you have anything left in the tank, after your set, you didn't choose a heavy enough weight. You gotta choose a weight that you're going to fail. The whole deal with high intensity training is the high intensity. So you wanna get to the point where you have a positive failure. Over here, there's very little positive failure. You may or may not even reach positive failure in any one of your sets with EDT training. Here, the whole objective is to hit positive failure with HIIT, right? So that right here is where you're gonna see the biggest difference. Is right in the middle here. It's the sets, the volume, and versus intensity. In fact, density in a way is like volume. Really, when it boils down to it, it's like we're talking volume versus intensity, and that's an old debate. Moving on to tempo. With regard to tempo, there's not much said in terms of escalating density training by their coach, Charles Staley. It's a matter of following a moderate intensity, right? 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Something that's very typical, right? Just move the weight, quite frankly. But over here, there's high emphasis placed on going real slow. Going real slow with that does what? It increases the intensity, because you have to work a lot harder and you get less volume when you slow down the reps. There's a tendency over here to want to beat your time, right? Which you should. You want to beat the volume and the amount of time. So there's a tendency to rush And so a lot of people will like just bang out the exercises like they're doing CrossFit or something because they're under the clock. And so it goes from moderate sometimes to high. I've done EDT before, especially if I'm doing it for strongman. And strongman is a timed sport. That's why it's good for strongman. And so I'll be trying to go as fast as I can. Not the best way to build hypertrophy. Not the best way to have time under tension if you're going too fast. This, slowing it down, is all about high intensity. And then so we'll finish up with frequency. I'm not 100% sure what Staley's suggestion with frequency is here. But I'm thinking it's more a matter of like 2-3 times a week you could probably hit the same muscle, right? My experience is you're just not getting as sore. Let me put it that way, right? So maybe he does have some suggestions, but my experience, you just don't get so sore, so you can hit it more often, right? And I know that there's a lot of research out there that says that every time you hit a muscle or you do an exercise, you're stimulating protein synthesis. So like high frequency is not a bad thing. High frequency is great. In fact, one of my favorite training programs, 5x5, is all about high frequency. You're hitting the bench press, the squat, the deadlift 3 times a week. So frequency may be a good thing, but just to be objective here, we're doing a lot more frequency over here. Mike Mentor in particular is very adamant about the fact that you want to back off. You want to do less. Minimum effective dose. You want to do less and less and less, as little as possible. So if you're hitting a muscle once a week in the beginning, and reading some of his books, in the beginning he would suggest training once a week, hitting a muscle only once a week. Later on, as he got stronger and he started working with clients, he began to notice that, hey, maybe only once every 9 days, 10 days to hit a muscle, because it's just so sore because you're obliterating the tissue when you hit that high intensity set. So what's my opinion on these two and which is better for building muscle? Now, let me be fair. EDT training, in my opinion, is best for athletes and beginners. Why? Because with regard to athletics, you've got to be able to maintain that mechanical work. You got to be able to do a lot. If I'm training for strongman and I do HIIT training, I'm not going to get the volume that I need to be in shape. I'm not going to also get the repetitions that I need in order to ingrain a motor engram. The more you do of a particular movement, the more, because strength is a skill, the more skillful you get at that sport. So I want to get more volume if I'm going to be doing a sport like strongman, or if, for example, any sport. Also, with regard to training beginners, I've tried both of these methods, higher volume versus higher intensity, with my children. My children are beginners. I got an 11-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 15-year-old that are training with me. 100% it's better to do more volume with them. Why? Because they're still learning the exercises. Because they're just learning the exercises, I need them to have repetition. I need them to do it over and over and over again. You're a beginner in training until you have at least a year under your belt. So if you haven't been training for a year yet, I wouldn't suggest hopping on HIIT training, except if you're using a machine. And we'll get to that in a moment. So athletes and beginners, best to use EDT. For bodybuilders and more advanced lifters, I think HIIT training is better. HIIT training is great because you get the minimum effective dose. You can build that muscle without spending much time in the gym. Some people need to spend more time in the gym so they can build that skill, but if you're just in there to get that pump, just build that muscle, get in and get out, which I love. I don't want to spend much time in the gym anymore. I used to be a gym addict. Now I'm a gym doctor. I just want to get that medicine and get out. So if you're a gym doctor rather than a gym bro, you want to get in there, you want to get your medicine, and you want to get out. So I think HIIT training is better in that regard. I don't need to learn the exercise. I don't need to learn the moves. I don't need to develop the skill unless I'm doing strongman. If I go back to a strongman competition, I'm going to need more volume. And sometimes I'll have to do that. So both of them are sort of equal in what they do better. But where HIIT training gets the advantage, in my opinion, is that with HIIT training, you can also increase density, but you can't do it the other way around. Escalating density there's no way to increase the intensity. You got to keep the intensity kind of low if you want to hit that volume. And you're always looking to get more volume in that shorter period of time. With high intensity training, you can increase the density by taking shorter rest intervals. So you can be doing the same amount of work, but by doing it in a shorter period of time, you increase the density. So high intensity training can also incorporate density training. Density training very rarely can increase your intensity. So there you have it, my opinion, guys. High intensity training for building more muscle, density training for building better athletes and for beginners. So that's my opinion. High intensity training takes the crown because you can incorporate density with the intensity. Done.